Welcome into 30 Minutes of Hell podcast, brought to you by the Field of 68 Network. I am honored, excited to welcome in the man, the myth, the legend, Mike Morgan. The man's got 18 years experience calling college basketball games, over 12 years on television, ESPN, SEC Network, and he makes me look good on a regular basis, which isn't easy, Mr. Mike Morgan.
You make it easy, and most importantly, you make it fun. That's the main thing. We've had a lot of fun over the years. I think you and I were partnered together the first 4 years of the SEC Network or thereabouts. Yeah. I might have had Spatola for a year, and since then I've had the likes of Sunbold and Debbie Antonelli, Dane Bradshaw did a lot of early work with him.
Have you survived Joe Klein? Have you had?
I've done a few games with Joe Klein. In fact, I did a spot game because you were sick. This was before COVID, so
I had the flu.
You had the flu back before COVID. I feel like we have to tell a whole generation, like before there was COVID, people actually got sick with a thing they called the flu, and it felt a lot like COVID, but we didn't have like quite the national scare with the flu, but it was still it sucked. Yeah. So you had the flu. That was your flu game. And Joe Klein had to fill it. Joe Klein had to, like MJ, Pat Bradley had a flu game.
I did not. So it was funny because I was getting sick in studio, and
right.
I'm trying to fight through it. And Dari Noak is on one side, Jimmy Dykes is on the other side.
Yeah.
And they look at me, they go, all right, I know you want to fight through this, but you are putting us at risk.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. There's an additional part of that story. They filed a class action lawsuit and took all of your belongings when they got sick. But we don't want to spend time on the controversial aspects of TV and all that good stuff.
But first, let me just say, you are the ultimate point guard.
Yes.
Make me look good.
I try.
Hand me the rock.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Just found your point guard in life.
Oh, look at this. Yep. And I know if she's watching, she wants to see that ring. Yeah. And she's got probably a better jump shot than, at least than me. You still are raining pretty well. Your jumper's still wet. Mine is like partly cloudy here of late. COVID, I was playing in all these Atlanta rec leagues because for guys like me, that's the highlight of our career. I didn't get to play D1 SEC like the Shooter did, and then COVID hit, and everything got shut down. No more leagues, no more pickup, nothing. And so I've regressed a little bit. But she's a Kentucky girl, so grew up. You grow up in Kentucky. She's athletic. She played high school basketball. Had some offers to play ball in school, in college, and so her jumpers, she's got me beat right now, but it's awesome because she loves the game.
The great coach Nolan Richardson told me we all need a point guard in life.
Right.
So that she can point out what you do wrong.
Yes.
On a daily basis.
She's not afraid to do that either.
So as you know, this is a 30 Minutes of Hell podcast. We've got a lot of Razorback listeners and viewers who are very familiar with you calling back Razorback basketball.
Big Suey. Heck yeah.
Big Suey. As a kid, you grew up in Florida. You played basketball. You loved basketball. What were your earliest impressions of Razorback basketball growing up?
Yeah. So, like you said, I grew up in South Florida, and I think our man Dan Leibovitz and I have something in common. I think he was with Temple around the time Eddie Jones played there. I played against Eddie Jones in an AAU game, and I was like 15 and he was 18, and I wanted to impress the coaching staff and take a charge, and he leapt right over me. Literally. So they didn't have like social media back then, and thankfully there were cell phone cameras back then. But somewhere, in the pearly gates, there's a picture of Eddie Jones with his legs spread, and me taking the charge position and watching him.
Was Rex Chapman there taking a picture, going block or charge?
Block or charge? Yeah. No, thankfully, no. Rex wasn't there. Nobody was there, but no, I got a chance to get my first taste of hoops at just. Playing down there, and then my whole there's SEC in my background everywhere. My brother went to Auburn, so I loved those old teams watching as a kid with Barkley and the old Sonny Smith teams
Yeah.
and the Rifleman Chuck Person and so on and so forth. And back then you didn't have the SEC network, so if you could see an SEC game on TV, it would be like Jefferson Pilot, right? And it
Yeah,
was
the
like,
old
okay.
JP.
Yeah. So that's how you got your game. So I was an
Larry
SEC.
Conley,
Larry Conley, absolutely. Tim
Tom
Brando.
Hammond, Tim Brando. Yeah.
Tommy Hammond, yeah. And so I was a two-pronged fan of hoops. Number one, I loved SEC basketball, but you didn't get a whole lot of it. And number two was watching Big East, like Big Monday doubleheader. So before we moved to Florida, I lived in Virginia. I used to go to camps at Georgetown. So I was a big Hoya fan. So I loved John Thompson's Georgetown Hoya teams, and they were on all the time. I mean, they were a national phenomenon. But yeah, and the one memory of SEC hoops I have, and I tell this story. I can't remember what night of the week it was, but Florida's playing LSU, and it's prime time, so I'm watching. And I knew about the Florida guards. They had like this talented guard out of Miami, and he was like the big hype and this and that. And LSU rolls in there, and a kid by the name of Chris Jackson scores 53. And I mean, if you go back and watch it on YouTube, it's one of the most impressive 53s you'll ever see.
Oh,
he's like just dribbling down, scissor dribble between the legs, pull up three. Then it's like hesitation, guy goes to the pump fake, blow by, layup, dunk. He did everything. And the very next day in practice, I grabbed my Converse Energy Wave sneakers and put the number 35 on there because I wanted to be like Chris Jackson. And obviously I was never going to be like Chris Jackson, but that was my favorite guard in the SEC at that point, early on in high school, right? And then of course you had the Rick Pitino teams. Don't worry, folks.
Hold on now.
Yep.
I can't get this far into the story. First of all, they were rolling with Nolan. They were giving it.
I'm getting there. No, I'm getting there,
baby.
Todd
Day, Lee Mayberry.
Oliver
Miller.
You have to appreciate the journey here, Pat. I'm a storyteller. So if I just go from A to B right to Arkansas hoops, it doesn't have the same luster, right? So I'm watching and then appreciated Rick Pitino's Kentucky teams, and then I got a chance to see Arkansas. And here's where it circles back to Arkansas. The first major event I ever covered, I was a 19-year-old student reporter covering the Final Four. And Florida was in it, that Lon Kruger, Demet Hook team. Everybody remembers Dimitri Hill because he was big and lovable. But the fact of the matter is that was a guard-laden team. Dan Cross, Craig Brown. Without them, they don't get there. But so I'm there to cover that. And, of course, Arkansas is there. And Arkansas, that collection, I mean, I remember Dillard was one of my favorite players because he wouldn't just hit threes. He'd bomb them from the parking lot. And obviously, Mayberry and Day, and then eventually Corliss Williamson. And, Nolan would play 10, 11 guys. And those epic, again, I'm still in school when all this is happening, but those epic Arkansas-Kentucky matchups with Nolan and Pitino, it didn't get better than that. I'm sorry. North Carolina Duke was great, but it didn't get better than that. It was a shorter window of time. So that was my introduction to Arkansas basketball. And then, then I did radio at South Carolina. So that was my first chance to actually call games, center court, all the SEC arenas. And that's when I got my first experience being in Fayetteville in person. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is fantastic. Because you got to remember, we're spoiled now. But I'll break it down and be honest with you. The SEC venues back then, you had Rupp, right? And then you had Fayetteville, both arenas in Fayetteville. For me, it was more Bud Walton.
Right.
But after that, there was a drop-off. Like, depending if Florida was good one year, the student section would pack it. And if Tennessee was good, then they do well. And if LSU was good, then they do pretty solid. But to me, at that point in time, nothing held up to Lexington and Fayetteville. So when I had a trip to call a game there on radio, I was like juiced. Like, this is fantastic. And my first couple of trips to Arkansas, I was just in awe. I was just looking around and the Pig Suey chant and not an empty seat in the house. And everybody was just so into it. And it was refreshing to me because all these stigmas have changed. And I've been one of these that I've been like almost to the point of being angry as a lifelong SEC guy. When I hear people go, well, football conference, football schools, I'm like, look, there's no reason why you can't be a fan of both. Like, It doesn't take that much intellectual power to actually be a fan of both SEC football and basketball, and to be good at both SEC football and SEC basketball. And what we've seen since then, 21 bids in the last 3 years, multiple teams, the Final Four, and it ain't all Kentucky, which is great for the league. But back then, you kind of felt like it was only a few, that the environments were great, that the fans were all in. And I noticed right away, like Arkansas fans, they didn't only love basketball because the team was good. They just loved the sport, and they could quote, of course, the old A's and Sidney Moncrief, and they were all in. And so that was one of the reasons why one of my favorite trips always during radio and eventually as I went into TV was to go to Fayetteville, because you can't teach fans to love the game. Like, they either love it or they don't. And there's some teams that when they'll jump the bandwagon when the team is good and they'll pack it, and that's great. But Arkansas people really love the game of basketball, not just the fact that when the Razorbacks are good. And that's one of the reasons why that was always and still is one of my favorite trips to do a game.
Yeah, talking with Coach Richardson a few weeks ago, when the Hogs did get into the SEC, it was a big deal because of how the early 90s teams were. And even Coach Sutton's teams, they have great tradition, obviously. So it was a big boost to the league. When you look at how it's gotten to where it is, and there was a lull for a few years. I think we can all admit that.
No question.
Looking at some of the NCAA tournaments in the 1990s. And, you had usually about 4, 5, 6 teams that would go to the tournament. But it was Arkansas, Kentucky was there. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Florida in the mid-90s, and then when Billy Dunham.
Right.
It was crazy. But then you had a couple years South Carolina was good. A couple years Georgia with Tubby Smith.
Mm-hmm. Ole Miss.
Remember they went to the Mississippi State, heck of a team in '96. Ole Miss, with
Dante Jones, Eric Dampier, Wilson. That was a hell of a team.
Amazing team. So what do you think has happened over the last couple years, or I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years in the SEC to get it back to now we're talking 7, 8 teams this year?
Yeah.
How was that?
Well, and you were spot on in your assessment. Like we did one of these, remember when you took like microeconomics and they talked about the curves and this and that? Somehow I
don't remember when I took, because I never.
You took the course. We don't know what you learned in the course or retained, Patrick. No, but so like the SEC in the late 90s, early 2000s.
That's coffee, by the way. I like my coffee.
I did. Absolutely. I've never seen any man drink more coffee and still be able to take a midday nap on game day. And I respect that. But in the late 90s, early 2000s, we were getting like 6 bids a year as a conference. And back then the league was only 12 teams. You added Arkansas and South Carolina. Yeah. So it was like half the league was getting in. And like, I was like, yelling from the rooftops, hey folks, I know you love the ACC. I know you love the Big Ten, but take a look at who's getting the most NCAA bids. It's the Southeastern Conference. Well, then the conference hit a lull, and it started happening around 2009, 2010. And if you go back like 2012 through 14, I think those 3 years combined, there was only 10 bids, a little more than 3 a year. So it was like Kentucky and Florida would just dominate, right? Billy Donovan and Cal's teams would dominate. And then you'd have like one team that have a nice year, maybe Bruce Pearl's Tennessee teams or whatever. And then it was like just bad. I mean, let's be honest. It was bad.
Yeah.
And that's when the SEC decided no more. We've got the resources. We are going to make a full-fledged commitment to college basketball. And every coach, I'm not just pumping this up because you and I work for the SEC network, but every coach, when they talk about it from Cal on down, will tell you the SEC network was huge. To have every conference game and several out of conference games all on national television, you don't think that helps in recruiting? It's huge. But it's more than just that. From Greg Sankey to Dan Leibovitz and some of their predecessors, they decided we're gonna put our whatever in the sand here, and we're going to say, you're going to schedule better. Okay, no more just playing 12, 13 patsies non-con. It hurts the league. We're going to schedule better. We're going to make a commitment to facilities, and you guys are about to have more money to play with thanks to ESPN, SEC Network financially. You might want to spend a little more, perhaps, on the coaching, and that's when all of a sudden the influx of Rick Barnes, I mean, all these great coaches would come in, and then the facilities just kept getting better and better. I mean, there's no more Tad Pad, with all due respect to the fine folks in Oxford. They now have the Pavilion, which is beautiful. There's no more Beard Eves in Auburn. Again, all due respect, once they DDT that thing, there's now Auburn's become one of the best and most intimidating home court environments out there.
Oh, it's crazy.
Florida's redone that. I mean, go on and on. So the facilities, the coaches, the financial all got better. And now we're seeing all these top 100, our man Paul Biancardi coming up with that list every year. And we're seeing the SEC leading the way in top 100 recruits. We're seeing the SEC get 7 first-round draft picks back-to-back years, 76 players on NBA rosters this year. So we no longer have to say the Southeastern Conference in basketball has to take a back seat to anybody. And as someone who's been around this league as long as I have, and to watch again that curve and those peaks and valleys, to now see where it's not only a peak, but it's a consistent peak. Like this year, I mentioned 21 bids the last 3 years. Pat, you can do that math. That's 7 a year. Okay. Is there any chance the SEC gets fewer than 7 this year? I mean, I don't see it. You know, I look at Bama, Arkansas, LSU, Tennessee, Florida, Kentucky, Auburn, and I'd be shocked if either of those teams did not get in. And then, oh, by the way, Mississippi State, dangerous. Texas A&M under buzz. Look out for them in year 3. Could be dangerous.
Ole Miss is always there.
Ole Miss is always dangerous. Yeah, absolutely. And when they, when they get healthy, when they get healthy, they'll be even more dangerous. But my point is that there hasn't been a down year. Like we're in a stretch here of just good years, and there's no reason to believe that the SEC is going to regress again because of the commitment. It all starts in Birmingham at the SEC offices. And I think every AD in this league, to a man, has recognized that you no longer can just say, I'm going to put all my resources into football, and if we do well there, then the fan base won't get me on having a lackluster basketball program or a lack of commitment. No. They expect you to be good in both. They expect you to put resources into both, just like you would baseball and everything else this league is good at. So I've watched that, and it's been a pleasure to see. And obviously for guys like us, it's been a pleasure to cover.
It's been fun because, like you mentioned, schools and ADs, school presidents, I think they all see the value in having a great basketball program. Like in the past, Kentucky obviously knows the value. Arkansas, going back to Coach Broyles, knew how important it was. Even the Eddie Sutton days, Nolan Richardson days, how important it was to have a great basketball program. And I think now all the schools are on board with that.
Yeah.
Which, like, that level of commitment. So as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking to myself, we currently have one coach in the league that has won a national championship, right? Mm-hmm. Coach Cal. Right. Mm-hmm. We have, 3 schools, Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, with a national championship to the school's name.
Right. And several that have been to a Final Four recently.
Right. So that's it. Now we get guys knocking. Ben Holland's been to a Final Four. If Rick Barnes, and so, and we'll get into Coach Musselman too, and your impressions with him, because he's in the lead. He's knocking on the door there. So, what I guess in terms of, I know you wouldn't be surprised. Bruce Pearl Final Four. I mean, who?
Frank Martin Final Four at South Carolina.
Yeah, Frank Martin, South Carolina. And I mean, are you comfortable where you can say, you can lay down? I'm talking, you're laying down the deed to your new house on who's the next in line to win one.
Oh, wow. Wow. You kind of just smoothly like let me get comfortable.
I'm not going to put those thoughts.
And then you're like, now we're going 60 minute style. Who's winning the next natty in the league? So, I'll answer it. I won't duck it. I'll answer it. If you were to put a gun to my head, and I know you're not a violent man, so you wouldn't do that. But if I had to pick one, and I'm sure I'm going to aggravate some fan base by saying this, because I think you got multiple coaches that are going to taste the Final Four in this league. I think the Muss Bus will get there. I think Rick Barnes will take Tennessee there. Florida came close under Mike White, made it to an Elite Eight. Ironically enough, lost to South Carolina, who got there. I'm a big fan of Nate Oates.
Yeah.
And I'm a big Nate Oates guy, and I'm a big what he's doing at Alabama guy, not just in the short term and the long term. So I guess if I had to pick one, like, okay, who's going to get there? Not named Kentucky in the next however many years.
Yeah.
All those names I mentioned would be prime candidates. But I'll go ahead and throw a feeler out at Nate Oates.
They're probably the odds-on favorite as we sit here today. December 21, they're the highest AP ranked team. Yep. I think LSU, if you look at Ken Palm and net rankings and things like that, LSU is right there.
Yep.
Before we move on, let me tell you guys a little bit about our partners over at BetRivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up for BetRivers yet, now is the time, because they are offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, it's more secure, and it's more reliable. Now that basketball season is tipping off, get in on the action at betrivers.com today, or by downloading the BetRivers iOS app. You must be 21 years or older. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. And while I got you here, let's talk about the Field of 68 Media Network, where college basketball matters most all year round. This is a digital media and podcast network that we've been building over the course of the last year. We have shows hosted by some of your favorite players covering the program that they love the most. AJ Guyton hosts the House of Hoosier. Eric Devendorf covers Syracuse on the Scorer's Table. Dan Dickow hosts the Gonzaga Bulldog broadcast. We have Florida's Patrick Young and Duke's Andre Dawkins and North Carolina's Shammond Williams and Michigan's Stu Douglas and Illinois' Deion Thomas. The list goes on and on and on. We have more than 30 shows right now. So hit the links below and check them all out. And while you're at it, make sure that you go check out the Field of 12 Media Network, your home for college football.
So let's go back, Coach Musselman. What were your impressions when he took the job? I'm sure you were familiar with him when he was at Nevada, like a lot of us, and obviously his name in basketball has been around decades with his father, and obviously with him being an NBA coach. So what did you think when you heard Eric Musselman hired by Arkansas?
I loved it. I know that's going to seem like 2020 hindsight to the viewers of your podcast, but I think when something is not working, you've got to look at it differently, and you got to try something different. Same thing in football. Like if you keep hiring defensive coordinators as head coaches and it's not working out, well, you better find an offensive mind. If you keep going for the retread, then maybe you ought to find a fresh and new hire and a fresh and new voice with a different viewpoint and a different background. And that's what Musselman is. Musselman, yeah, he did great things at Nevada, but he was not a guy that had deep SEC ties. And he was not a guy who was, I don't know, maybe the hottest of names out there. He's not what you would call traditionally young. Like he's not a 30 something, which some people think is like the hottest thing since sliced bread. Although if you look at the NCAA tournament and you look at which programs are having the most success, they're not wet behind the ear 30 something year old coaches. They're the savvy veterans who are getting to Final Fours more often than any other demographic. And I just like I looked at his background, and I was familiar with some of it, obviously. but I knew like, here's a guy that has had to grind it everywhere. You know, when you're coaching multiple minor leagues, I've called some G League games. I'm going to tell you what, that's like the most challenging basketball coaching job on the planet, because you got guys who all think they're good enough, but they're not there. So they want to put up numbers. They don't care about winning as much as personal accomplishments, because they just want to get.
Oh, I coached in the big league. I had these conversations, daily basis with these guys.
I mean, you know what that's like. So he did that. He grinded it out of multiple minor leagues, has NBA experience, which, again, these kids all want to go and they all think they're going to go NBA. So when you got a guy who could say, hey, look, I've been there. I've got contacts there. I know what it's like. I knew that was going to help. And I just knew you weren't going to outwork Muss. So guy that paid his dues, guy that's been around the block, guy that had ties to the NBA, guy that just came off an incredible run at Nevada. You added all that up to me. And I was like, yeah. Same thing at Alabama. Like, I did a couple of Nate Oates' MAC championships. And I remember nobody thought when he was at Buffalo, they had the most talented team in the league, but he kept winning it. And I was like, there's just something about this guy. So both of those hires, I guarantee you, while most of the national media are like, I don't know, Musselman, Oates, like that's not exactly a home run splash hire. I don't know if I can get behind that. I was like, yes. I really, I was on board with those two. And I think those two are going to continue to help the diversity of SEC success, because we know what Kentucky can and will do. Quite frankly, we've gotten used to knowing what Tennessee and Auburn can and will do under Barnes and Pearl, right? Like, we're not surprised any longer if they go to the tournament or make it to a Sweet 16. But Arkansas and Alabama had hit a bump in the road, if we're going to be honest. And they were not reaching that level of success that most people thought they would or could or should. Well, now they are, and I don't think it's blips on the radar. I mean, think of all the players Arkansas and Alabama lost. I keep lumping those together because I think there's similarities. So forgive me, Razorback Nation, if I keep saying Alabama here. But they both lost key players to NCAA tournament teams that had success in the tournament last year. And I'm not saying it's been a perfect start to the season, but I think they're both in pretty good shape again this year. And then you've got terrific recruiting classes coming in. If I'm not mistaken, they both have top 10 recruiting classes coming in next year. That's when you know they haven't just had a good year. They've built programs for sustained success. And I certainly see that with Musselman in Fayetteville.
Yeah, it's in with those two guys and the coaches around the league, there's a chip on their shoulder. And you mentioned like Coach Muss and Coach Oates. They're a little bit different how they got there, but you can tell that they both have that chip on the shoulder. Like there's like Coach Musselman wants to prove that he can win a national championship there. He'd been everywhere. And obviously Coach Nate Oates, his rise. I guess you would, looking at the league, he and Mike White would fall into that younger, I suppose. Although Mike White's our age, so can I say that?
I was going to say, I like where you're heading with that, because that means you and I, who are now north of 40, like that means we're young too. So keep going with that. Keep going with that. But you remember when like everybody was just like, oh, he's only in his 30s. That means it's a great hire because he's young and energetic. As if, I mean, go to a Musselman practice like you and I have and tell me he's not energetic. He's got more energy than any 25-year-old. So does Nate Oates. Age doesn't necessarily mean more energy.
Right. And I, Coach Musselman's figured out too how to do everything around it, whether it's social media, you mentioned the recruiting, how important all of that is. You can't just do it like back in the day. I mean, I think you have to, if you aren't comfortable doing it, you have to have somebody on your staff that understands how to use all these, because there's more resources than ever, to your point about schools. And the school's like, okay, what are you going to do with all this money? Like, you can hire 10 assistant coaches. I know you do this when we get ready for games. But if you go to the websites of these schools and you look at the staff, it is not uncommon to see 8 to 10 people on staff. So
analysts.
And so with that, I think Coach Musselman, you mentioned his energy. You always got to be looking and thinking for the next thing. I mean, and I think that's what I appreciate about the coaches in this league. They all got a chip on their shoulder, man. I don't care if you're Rick Barnes, he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's trying. Bruce Pearl, the Wade's teams, Mike. And that's the beauty of it. It's so competitive. Yeah, because these guys know that if you're, it could. If you're not ready to fight every day, then it could go south quickly.
Well, here's the best thing about it that I can say. Like, I was talking to somebody affiliated with a particular SEC program the other day, and they're not one of the 8-9 teams that we were talking about earlier. And the guy was saying, but Mike, I think they're going to be pretty good. And I said, I don't disagree with you, but here's today's day in SEC, today's day and age in the SEC. You can be pretty good and find yourself 6-12, right? That dark period we were talking about, like 2013, 14, if you were pretty good, you were probably guaranteed like 10 wins in this league. You were going to have a good year if you were pretty good. Now you can be pretty good and find yourself fighting for mediocrity because the league is that loaded. So obviously there's nothing but good that comes out of it. You and I love it. The SEC loves it. The fans love it. But for the coaches that maybe don't have quite the roster that those elite 8-9 teams have, if you're not careful, you could find yourself having a really down year. And that is the cost of playing in an elite basketball league. And I think that's what the SEC has become. It's become an elite basketball league that's never been deeper, that's never been more talented top to bottom. And with that, you realize you can't just have a pretty good team to have a good year. You got to be really good.
Yeah, let me ask
tournament team.
Let me ask you this, because for a few years, I've seen, not only a few years, for a while now, maybe, gosh, it could be 10 years. Fans in general and us, we have gotten into and it's happened to college football. It's all about the tournament. Like, you could have a great regular season, lose first game of the tournament, and everybody's like, what happened? And that's a one and done tournament. So it's kind of unfair. Yeah. And so I guess my question is, let's say you look at the SEC this year. The team that wins the league quite possibly could not be the team that goes furthest in the tournament. So do you see any correlation between how a team is built and how they win in the NCAA tournament versus maybe the success that they have throughout the regular season? Is there any difference, or is it just sometimes the luck of the draw who you get matched up with in the tournament? I mean, there's so many factors. I guess
there is. And first off, those are problems you want to have. Like, if you're a fan base and you're complaining about the fact that your team's in the tournament every year, but you didn't go as far as you wanted to, like, you've got the sniffles while most programs have pneumonia. Because most coaches know, if I don't get to a certain amount of tournaments in X amount of years, I'm going to lose my job. I tell this to people all the time, like, college football is so, like, I just did a bowl game in Orlando with Coastal Carolina and Northern Illinois. And then, so you say, well, you got to a bowl game. That's great. Well, it was for those two programs, and Coastal Carolina had another memorable year. But for a lot of fans, like, I don't want to just celebrate a tier 3 bowl game, which are going on right now in some cases. And so it muddies the water on what's a successful program, what coach is really doing a great job versus what is not. In basketball, it's so much easier. It's cut and dried. Fans want to know two things. They don't want to know about 20-win seasons. They don't want to know about, I made the CBI. They want to know two things. How many tournaments did you make? What did you do when you got there? Yeah. That's it. And for some fan bases, for some programs, just getting there is a huge accomplishment. And you're not going to fire a coach if he makes 3 NCAA tournaments in 4 years. Very few programs are going to do that. For other programs, it's like, for Kentucky, it ain't enough to just get there. Like, you got to get to Final Fours, and Coach Cal's been to 4 of them. And I still hear when I go to Lexington to do a game, well, we need more out of Cal. It's like,
he's got to win them. Now it's
right. He's got 1 title. He's got 4. Yeah, but we need more Final Four. Okay. So everybody's different, but you get there and you want to win. And to your question, look, I'll fall back. It's kind of cliche. Teams that defend well always seem to have a better chance in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
I always think the underrated factor is too, teams that have some players who have already played in the NCAA tournament, right? Even with the high turnover in today's college basketball, with the transfer portal and everything else, if you got some guys on that roster, you got some guys in that starting lineup that have actually played in an NCAA tournament, that's invaluable. That's invaluable, because you know what it's like when you go to one. And if you've never been, everything is just different. It's kind of awkward. You're playing at a neutral site. You've got multiple teams in that area, and you're playing a team you've likely never faced before. So you're scouting, you're this, you're that, and your fans are not quite there because it's just how many tickets can they gobble. Right. Everything's just different and awkward. So you just don't know. So I love teams that actually have veterans that have been in the NCAA tournament. I'll say one other thing. Nate Oates proved a lot of people wrong last year, because everybody said you can't, shooting 33s a game. That's fun in the regular season, but it ain't going to work in the tournament. Well, they did pretty well in the tournament, right?
You mentioned defense. They had one of the best defensive teams.
Thank you. They defend, and it's amazing how many people don't realize that the two aren't mutually exclusive. You can shoot a lot of threes and also play great defense. And then Nate Oates has teams that play very good defense, and obviously Coach Musselman, does as well. But to me, both those programs are going to have a leg up this year if they get back to the tournament, and I think they will, because even though they each lost some key players, they also have a couple guys coming back that were there last year and can tell the younger guys, can tell the transfer guys, hey, this is how we were good last year in the tournament. This is how we lost last year in the tournament. This is what we need to do better.
Mike Morgan, is always special to get a chance to talk with you, the greatest play-by-play shooter in America, Mike Morgan.
I'm breaking frames behind me. This is, Pat, the form it's still there, man. Elbow in, fingertips, follow through. It's still there. I still get people when I go out and do a game. Like, hey, 3-point play, you and Bradley, 3-point play. Like, they love that segment where you and I actually had to hit a 3 back-to-back at the shoot around before we, recorded our segment. And obviously, the pressure was on me because we knew you're going to hit most of the time. I got to be the schlep rock that goes out there and hits the first one. But that was a lot of fun. You and I had a lot of fun. I had fans tell me for years, like, you guys, the league. And to me, that's important. Like, I think that fans appreciate guys that
decades.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that does matter when you're watching a game, to have guys that actually have followed this league, that know the history of this league and have been around it. And B, I think we made it fun. Hopefully we made it enjoyable to listen to. I know you and I have got a few more games left this year. LSU, I haven't seen LSU in person yet. They're the only undefeated team left in this league. Will Wade's got another uber talented squad. I get to see Auburn for the first time in a couple weeks. Jabari Smith, come on.
Oh yeah, he could be the number 1 overall pick.
Probably will be. Can't wait to see him. And then it's like, I've had Kentucky a few times. They're good. And, Florida's good and Tennessee's good. It's like, it's just so nice to see this league get to this point. And again, I reiterate, I don't think it's going anywhere. I think this is going to be the norm. There's too many great athletes in this part of the country that want to stay in this part of the country and realize the SEC has legitimized itself as one of the top leagues in the game. So I think you and I are going to kind of ride this wave of success, if you will, for a long, long time. I love college basketball in all leagues. Don't get me wrong. I'm a hoop junkie. I watch as many games as I can in any league. But since you and I do a lot of SEC games, and you do a lot of great shows there with the studio and the SEC network in Charlotte, it is nice to be able to talk about more than 2 or 3 good teams every year. Am I right, Pat Bradley? Is that not a good thing for us?
The possibilities. It's always great. All right, my man. I
Oh,
appreciate it. We got a game tomorrow. I'm going to
That's
start
right.
getting work.
Undefeated LSU. Yeah. I'm excited to see them. And then we got more games coming up, and you got more studio to take care of, pocket squares and oversized pocket squares. You got to love it, my man. But no, it's been a pleasure. I caught a couple of these before already on the internet, and appreciate you taking the time to have me wax on poetic about
Of course.
and SEC basketball.
All right, brother. Appreciate it. Go get up some jump shots.
Will do.
All
Take
right.
care.
All right.